this is on autism, sensory processing, and the functional AAC use. And so let's get to it. Why are we looking at it? According to the CDC in 2018, 1 in 59 children are diagnosed with this disorder. According to our research, 40% of those getting AAC devices right now have at least a single, if not a dual, diagnosis of autism, meaning that autism is part of their picture. At least 40% of the kids using AAC right now. So sensory processing difficulties directly affect their ability to access the AAC device, even if they have a pointer finger. And when we looked at our when we looked at our data, a very large percentage, I think it was 59%, had sensory processing deficits. So even though only 40% have autism, there are those with Down syndrome, those with some other types of symptoms that also go along with sensory processing deficits, which brought, I believe, the number up to 59%. Well, I'll see if it's on another slide. And makes us realize that a very large number of those using AAC right now have sensory processing deficits that need to be addressed to make sure that when we are looking at AAC access, use, and language production, that we know what we're measuring. Are we measuring language, or are we measuring that sensory issue or lack thereof? The barriers to AAC for those with autism are stimming, where we have kids that will press the button over and over and over again. Lack of initiation, that's a super, super tricky one to teach, and we'll talk a little bit about it. Lack of social skills. When verbal, they will imitate the digitized speech over and over and over again in a melodic way. And there is a frustration to many teams that because they're looking at the device, they are losing the eye gaze that they fought so hard for. I kind of have a soapbox piece about the eye gaze. I think we're going to touch on it a little bit later, so I'll leave it alone, but those are some things that we have recognized for those with sensory processing deficits and what that kind of looks like when we have the AAC device in front of them. So again, this is what the research had to say, that 41% of them had autism, but as you look at all of the research numbers here, it adds up to more than 100% because there is so much dual diagnosis. And so we kind of need to be looking at that as well. I'm going to skip over this part. Here we go. 33% of those with autism had a dual diagnosis. So again, maybe you're looking at this child that they have CP, and then you didn't know that they also have an autism diagnosis, or they have a diagnosis of something that you feel really familiar with, and then you realize that there's a lot of sensory issues, and because of that they also have autism diagnosis. So we're going to take a look at the examples of the complicated sensory and motor systems for those on the autism spectrum here. Those that had within normal limits of sensory were able to do touch access, eye gaze, head pointing, and switch access. So we had some of everything that had normal. Decreased level of arousal was not as common as sensory seeking behaviors and overstimulating behaviors. And they're seeking, but then that becomes overstimulating. So that's the combo, right? But sensory seeking was the highest percentage of kids. And so what do we do with those kids that are just sensory seeking? Let's take a look. 59% reported deficits in the area of sensory and self-regulation, which is higher than what the percentage of autism diagnosis. And so we need to be looking beyond the diagnosis of autism and recognizing what does sensory seeking behaviors look like. We're going to learn some calming techniques, some thinking strategies, and think about sensory support in order to establish that self-regulation required to have accurate access to the AAC system. So the first thing we always hear is, well, he's not going to sit still. It's always interesting because they have asked us to come out to the evaluation, parents or the referring speech or language pathologist. But oftentimes these are the kids where we have the biggest naysayers. It's like, well, he's not going to sit still, so, and he's not going to carry it with him, so I'm not sure why we're doing this, and he's not going to be calm enough to do anything for you. And they're a little bit apologetic, but it's almost a statement. He's not going to do anything for you. So the strategies to do that to address this are understanding deep pressure and joint compressions and allowing them to stay moving, as well as buttons turning red when they touch them so that they draw attention, and setting buttons to a delay so that when they double tap, it does not speak or add words to their message window, and it becomes much less stimulating. We're going to review these strategies in more detail, so that's just kind of an overall piece. All she will do is stim on the buttons. She's just going to keep hitting the same one. She only likes Woody from Toy Story. She's only going to just keep hitting Woody till she sees Woody go across the message window, or till she hears Woody 380 times, and you guys all want to just take Woody off the machine. So let's talk about that. It is wildly stimulating too. Make a button flash a light, make a button beep or click, hear a word over and over again, or a part of a word if you're fast enough, or make a picture or a word appear in the message window in a row. So know your device. Know how to turn off the stimulation. Turn off the button, the beep, the click. Turn off, you can even hide the message window if that's the distracting factor that the words are going into the message window. I think the only one you can't hide the message window with is accent. Everything else you can do a no message window option. Hearing the word over and over again, or part of the word. So if it was going to be Woody from Toy Story, and they're going to hit, and it's going to go what, Woody, and you're going to have a Sir Mix-a-Lot going on, that's where you're going to set a delay. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So why do kids stim? Let's kind of get to the bottom of this. Everyone stims. It's okay. I swear I do, though more than twirl hair. This is written by Erin Clements. She did a TED Talk, and her boards are beautiful. I don't just chew gum. Don't just kick my feet. I have my own drum. I dance to my own beat. Sometimes I will rock. Sometimes I will flap. Sometimes for seemingly no reason I clap. Maybe I stand and start spinning around till my body feels better and I fall to the ground. But this is okay. This is just what I do. I have less common stims, but it helps me get through. Yes, I'm autistic, but it's the same thing you see. Everyone stims, not just you and me. So beautifully written, right? Think about what had to happen to her body to regulate, to write and type the words she did. So this is just kind of an insight into that body and how disorganized it all feels, and that she has to rock, flap, sometimes clap, stand, start, spin around until my body feels better. And so we have to give them time, space, and appropriate opportunities to regulate. And that can happen through sensory diet in your classroom, which occupational therapists can help you set up, but it can also happen within every session, and it can also happen, a little bit of sensory regulation can happen to curb a whole bunch of other behaviors. So we are, again, no matter what strategy we're looking at, no matter they won't sit still or they stim on buttons, the strategies stay the same. I want you to realize that your toolbox does not have to be extensive for this problem. You're going to be looking at deep pressure and joint compression, which could also be heavy lifting, allowing them to move, buttons turning red, and the delay. And all of these works for that kid who likes to sit still. So this is Juliet. So Juliet has straight up autism, no other diagnosis, no seizures, nothing else. And when I met her, she was not yet 3, and she had the attention span of about 10 or 15 seconds. Squishes. So she needs squishes in order to come back and forth to the device. She goes over, then she gets on the swing, and she hangs upside down, and she gets some more proprioceptive and sensory feedback. And I think and now she's completely focused.
To watch. 1, No.
So, I mean, she's inappropriate in the fact that she's asking to watch more TV, and that's not an option right now. But the fact that after some of those sensory experiences, she was able to sequence and go through words, go through pages. You're seeing that that's a lot of work to get her regulated, but then she's regulated for about 10 minutes at a time.
Do you want to play? Told me I want to play. What do you want to play?
Play-Doh.
What color Play-Doh do you
This
want?
is modeling the turning red when she touches it.
Brown.
Brown.
It keeps her attention.
I'm not sure if I know brown Play-Doh. What other color do you think you'd like?
Black.
Okay. I wonder what other color you might like.
Red.
Red. I think.
So she's picking the colors that aren't available, and some of our kids on the autism spectrum will also do that. They'll pick everything that's not a choice or whatever. But she's really regulated. She's super accurate, and it's turning red when she touches the button. That's something unique to NovaChat. However, on the accent, you can make it turn a little bit pink, and on the Snap Plus Core on Toby Dynavox, you can turn it a little bit pink. Most of the apps on the iPad can go to grayscale. So they give a little bit of feedback, or they give an outline of red, but nothing quite like this. And so sometimes this ends up being the deal breaker. We go with NovaChat because they only activate the NovaChat, and NovaChat and TouchChat are the same language system, but when it runs on NovaChat, you can have it turn red when they touch the button, and they can handle 60 buttons on a NovaChat with the turn red feature, and they can only do the multi-chat 15 on TouchChat because they just can't process all the visual information. The other thing that the red does is that if you have it set for speak upon release, some of our kids that have to enter at the same location every time, that may sound like it's unique, and it's not as unique as you might think. So some kids have to come in on that bottom, and then they slide and find the one they want, and when they release, it speaks the one they release upon. Some occupational therapists are going to be saying, no, I want them to figure out their motor plan. But guess what? Sometimes their motor plan is, I start here, and then they have to slide, but they're paying attention when they're sliding. Sometimes it's too stimulating and you have to turn it off. Most of the time, I would say 75% of the time, it's the answer rather than part of the problem. Meaning, if it's turning red too much, too red, too stimulating, then we turn that feature off. But that's a big deal thing that you need to know how to do. I'll probably end it. Maybe I should. I think I might even done a Tuesday tip on that, which is something comes up on Facebook every Tuesday. But it's a nice feature. There's an also future webinar on the differences between NovaChat and TouchChat, including this feature that's coming up later, and I will have the devices side by side and show you how to do some of those things. So he only has one topic of interest. This is very frustrating for me because we do see kids that, like Elmo for 20 straight years, or they like certain things for a very long time, and despite trying to increase, so then they say, I don't know if I need the device because all he wants is his iPad. He knows how to say iPad, so we really don't need anything else. And so that, I can tell you, is the same strategies, because it's amazing when you put a song page up there and they know when you get Row Your Boat and you're going to be pulling them and pushing them, now they're suddenly interested in Elmo and songs. Now they're suddenly interested in Elmo and Itsy Bitsy Spider, because you're doing deep pressure all the way up their body and all the way down. So sometimes the reason why that they only have one topic of interest is because that topic of interest, in whatever form it's being presented, meets a sensory need. So their topic of interest is iPad because it meets all of the sensory that they want. Or the topic of interest is trampoline. Because they want to go and just do that. And I have a boy later in the video, later with that video, all he wants to do is that. Why is that his topic of interest? It's because it meets his sensory need. How can we stimulate that in other ways that actually increase vocabulary? we have to make sure that other things that they communicate also give them sensory feedback. I started with him at 2. He did not have a device at this point. We were just trying it. All he wants to do is run from the front door to the wall and smack the door, run into the wall, run over to the door, run to the wall, run to the door. That's what he's doing at home a lot. They got the trampoline. He loves it. Those are the 2 things he wants to do. So how are we going to build language around this? And then how are we going to expand language? One of the things that we do is I go to like Joann's and cut a stretchy material tunnel, and it's like $10, and they have to crawl all the way through that tunnel, and kids can push and against it as much as they want until they have their needs met, and they crawl out to their device and they talk. And they do all kinds of things that you didn't know they knew, you didn't know that they could find, you didn't know that they were even interested in, because once their sensory needs are met, they crawl out and they're ready to talk to you. I wish I had a video of that, because he did this as well. But this is his mom, and she's holding his hands and helping him jump. And then notice that he begins to listen to the device. He responds to the device. I can even do delayed gratification. So initially he picks trampoline, he gets trampoline. Now he has to tell me more. You want to pick that?
Stop. 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 Stop.
Did you stop?
Go. 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 Stop. Trampoline. Trampoline. Trampoline.
Trampoline stop or trampoline go?
Go.
Go. Okay, lots of things happen in this video. First of all, he starts hitting, I say stop, he says stop, and he's gonna stim and hit stop until stop is going across the message window. And I let him do it. I pull the device back. I acknowledge that he stopped, and he gets nothing of what he wants. He doesn't get to jump. So then he hits go and he gets to do it. Next time I'm requiring trampoline go. But I use the device to say stop, and he hears it, he gets mad, he goes, ah, he stops jumping, and he comes over to the device, which means his sensory system is regulated enough that he's actually hearing, processing, and following directions from the device itself, and recognizing the power that the device has in the activity. All of that without any explanation from me. Now you need to listen until you hear stop, and then you have to stop jumping. Like, none of that's landing for this kid. But if you're modeling it and they're experiencing it physically, they can actually hear it and process the information. Now, this is 18 months later. And I love the iPhone feature for that reason, because I probably wouldn't even have known how long it took us to get to this point. We are at 42 buttons. This is before the 60 came out. He has just thrown the iPad and it broke. So he actually starts this video session by telling me that he's sorry. So have we fixed his sensory system? Absolutely not. Is he still like 4 and have major behavior issues? You bet. But let's just see what he does here.
I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Now what do you want to do?
2. Read a book.
You want to read a book? Okay, let's go to Christmas.
Christmas.
Oh, you want the No David book?
Cookies.
With the cookies.
No, David.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm sorry.
Okay. So huge gains from 1 or 2 buttons on a page that was not even, that was Proloquo, because that's all I had on the iPad that was at their house, to 42 buttons. Sometimes we're hidden. We're using the feature. It turns gray when he touches it, and we have a click when he touches it. It kept him from clicking more than 1 time because he knew it had received the information. But I'm playing around with, does a click or a beep help or not? Does turning gray help or not? Do I need to hide some favorite things to say and stim on when I want to be focused? You bet. So we're using all of those features. So she already talks, but it's in scripts. So we do have a huge population of those on the autism spectrum that are not being referred for AAC evaluations because they are verbal. But as speech pathologists, we have to question, are they functionally verbal? Or are they verbal in the sense that they can repeat the entire movie? They have echolalia and can repeat whatever you say. And even sometimes they talk in scripts, meaning they use a script appropriately, like they pull a line from, I don't know, Inside Out, and it's actually appropriate to be talking about emotions at this moment, but it's not exactly right on. These are kids that oftentimes are saying a script at the evaluation and finding, I'm hungry, I want fruit snacks on the device. And what is coming out of the mouth and what they're actually processing and wanting are so different that it makes me feel like those that only script are not functionally verbal and should have an alternative means of communicating. I don't think we have a video on that. So they need AAC, even if they have words, even if they can repeat, even if they can say, I want chips, please, because we have done something to the point, we have therapized them that they have that carrier phrase and they can request food, and food sustains life. But you know what? It's not communication. And so they can quote movies and commercials. The other thing is they need AAC if it's not intelligible. Sometimes those with sensory issues are intelligible at the one word level, but as they begin to string words together, they are less intelligible. And if you don't have context, you don't know. And most of these kids are not giving you facial expressions or body language that help you with cueing. And just like anything, you can have a dual diagnosis of apraxia, oromotor apraxia, phonological processing disorders, along with sensory processing issues. And so those phonological errors come into play as well. It's very challenging as a speech pathologist to work on repairing phonological errors with this population. So if it's not functional, they need a bridge, because if their speech isn't functional and their cognition is typical, which normally it is, low cognition is not part of the diagnosis for autism. Whenever there's that discrepancy, you're going to see frustration increase, behaviors increase, and it's not just sensory behaviors, it's smacking, hitting, biting, and self-injurious behaviors. And we have to figure out how to curb that. So until verbal speech is more functional, we need a bridge so that the bridge is not behavior. So this is what it's like to be nonverbal. I can't move this somewhere where I can read my whole screen. Hold on. What it's like to be nonverbal, and it's written by Not Rain Girl. This is an author you should probably look up at some point. So I think we color-coded it to kind of help us. So here's the girl. E-O, E-O, time, tubby, bye-bye, tubby, bye-bye, E-O, E-O. So she's imitating Teletubbies. The doctor says, it seems like she can speak just fine. It's just being lazy with requests. This is an actual doctor's appointment, by the way. What did you do at school today? He says. Her brain. You did some drawings and some math. Then you played outside. You read a story. Come on, tell him. What actually comes out of the mouth? E-O, E-O, we can fix it. A mix of Teletubbies and Bob the Builder. The brain. Perry. Come on, if you can say that, why can't you say it in your own words? Dr. Perry, what did you do at school today? Did you draw? Did you do some drawings? Me, nod. What did you draw? Me, can't say anything. Perry, ah, my brain, oh boy, which turns into a meltdown. Isn't this a fascinating and interesting script written by this person who is hearing her script come out of her mouth and knowing that it's not matching the language inside? And what would she and could she do with a tool? If she is, I mean, some of these kids are, I just did an evaluation last night, some of these kids are hyperlexive and they have great words, they have great ways of typing, even typing when they're saying something else and they're typing, actually spelling. But most of our school age kids don't have that skill yet. And so they need to have another way. I would, sorry, one more part. I would script a lot, but often people would think just because I could script, I could speak my own words, but this was wrong. I was pretty much being a parrot, repeating words I'd heard in the exact same voice in the exact same way, but that's not what she had to say. I find this so awesome and interesting, and something we need to be thinking about every time we're in front of somebody who's verbally scripting. What are the strategies? How do we fix that? The exact same things. We have to regulate their sensory system. And by the way, when they hear their voice is saying something that's different in their head, their anxiety is rising. So they're going to need sensory information. They need to get moving. Sitting still is never helpful for them right now. And then they need to have the actual words in front of them. So we need to be thinking about the auditory accommodations that need to happen, beeps, clicks, those kinds of things. The visual things, does it need to be, does it need to turn red? Do they need a tactile thing, which could possibly be a key guard? So the auditory can be a volume, activate upon release. That means it doesn't talk till you release from it. And again, that has to do with if they need to come in a certain way. And a quick way to silence the device. Most of them now, if you hold down the X in the message window, silence the device. And that means if they have hit it a whole bunch of times, you can silence the device. The one that doesn't do that is accent. So for those on the autism spectrum using PRC, Unity, accent devices, I end up putting a speech on and off button on their front page where I can turn the speech off quickly. But it's never as quick as just holding that X button down, like on the iPad or on NovaChat. And that makes that stim all the way across. You hold the X down, it clears the message window and stops the voice, and it's not very stimulating anymore. The visual device, read upon selection, release, and number of icons on the screen. If there's any area of contention between me and the occupational therapist, it's this. The occupational therapist does not want this to be too visually stimulating, and I want more vocabulary, the better. And sometimes those are juxtaposed. Sometimes they can do all the language on this multi-chat 15, and when I put them on the 60, they literally use their hands and smack it. And I'll put it back on the 15, and I've got the pointer, and they're moving again. And again, this is the first time they've seen either one of these layouts. So it lets me know, as much as I want to increase vocabulary and start them as high as they can, and possibly start them at a point where they will never have to learn another motor plan because we're going to start with so much. If you get too far ahead of yourself, you will be unsuccessful completely. Also, especially on this PRC layout down here, we have been called in for reevals a lot on this system, and the only thing the child does is the apple and asks for a snack, and it's a giant choice-making machine for food, because they were first and originally taught how to ask for their food, and it's too visually stimulating to pay attention to anything else on there, and language was never expanded. So the question is it worth it to have 60 buttons if they only can focus on 2 or 3? Probably not. Is it going to be harder later that they have to they have to change their motor plan to increase their numbers? It's harder in some ways, but it's easier because they already know the value of the device. They already know how it works, and they already now want to communicate with you. So starting at somewhere along the 15 is going to be less visually stimulating and still enough language to be powerful. Having said that, in the research, and I don't remember what comes next, but in the research, over 80% of kids could handle more than at least 15 on a screen. So as much as I wanted to, Kristen, let me know if there's any questions.
Sure. We just were getting some, so I'm going to ask the question. Let's see. So in PRC device, you can hide buttons, right? So that was a question. And then a follow-up about, I think that is a problem with how ProLoquo is automatically screened with so many button selections. So referring to what you're talking about with so many buttons on the screen.
Yes. So with Proloquo, you can go in and change your grid size though, and have less on there. But then you introduce the scroll feature, so you can turn that off. But then you do have to flip through more pages. So as far as accent, the accent is you used to be able to hide show, as in if any user that you have right now, you can hide and show. Anybody getting a device in the last, let's see, it came out, I think it came out at ATIA, so in January, you have to use what's called Vocabulary Builder, which is a different kind of system where you type in all the words you want to focus on and it hides everything but those words. It's not as quick as the hide show that you and I are familiar with in some of the other systems. I think that is the problem with how Proloquo is automatically screened with so many buttons and selections. That's true. So there's some issues there with Proloquo. The other thing with Proloquo is that it automatically populates your choices in alphabetical order. And our kids aren't typically looking for things in alphabetical order. So then you're messing it up by pulling them all the high interest ones up onto the front page. So sometimes the more vocabulary, the more work it is actually to organize the system. So those are all valid points. Another thing I do often is a checkerboard layout. This works with kids that have dual sensory issues, including vision and or cortical visual impairment along with their autism or their sensory issues. It gives them some forgiveness, some time, some space to undershoot and overshoot and not accidentally navigate to another page as they are refining their access methods. So you can have a 15 button layout and it's still too much feedback, visual distraction, and you can create a checkerboard and only reveal those black spots when they are ready to have more visual stimuli. And that's just happens in almost every system, honestly, by every other button being hidden and then choosing that background color to be black. Anyways, I think the latest research was a navy blue because it reduces reflection and kids get less distracted at smiling themselves in those little black boxes. Tactile key guards. So some kids that have dual diagnosis of, again, some vision issues or eye-hand coordination issues along with their autism or along with their sensory seeking issues, this can be tactily helpful. You will probably want to get them to be fixed though, because another stim sensation is to maybe click or open and shut or pull on that guard. And so if the guard itself is more sensory stimulating than the benefits, don't do the guard and do less buttons. And again, that hurts me to say it because it means less vocabulary. But if they can't access more buttons without creating a new stim, meaning the guard or the visual stimuli of more, then you have to start as low as their sensory system allows for independent access. Hope that lands. This is like one of those release times. When I talk about delayed release time, it means that if they tap really quickly, it will only, they actually have to hold for just a second. And in this case, most kids respond and decrease or eliminate the tapping if the release time is 0.2 or 0.3 seconds. It is almost nothing, but it won't talk unless they hold it a little bit longer, and it breaks that pattern. And I can often get them to not double tap or multi-tap within the evaluation by just changing this one thing. And then we've not created a habit of doing that. When you have a kid that's been doing that for 4 years and you set up this setting, they get pissed off. But they have to learn how to hold it a little bit longer to make it talk, hold it till it talks, and now you've broken that pattern of stim. So it's magic. It really is. And I think we have that here in a video.
something on this page you wanted to play? I saw that you changed it. What is it?
Ball toy.
You want to throw the ball again?
So she's just stimming. She just ran over those red buttons and they didn't talk.
Your.
And now she slowed her hand down.
Let's go back. Do you want to throw the ball again?
Yes.
So she reduced the visual stimuli. She had the release on there. And so she slowed down her whole body. So there's a couple things going on in the video, but the combination of it allows for her to, if she stimmed on it, she didn't get enough feedback for that to be, it was just really fleeting, her hitting some buttons that just to see if they would talk. And then because they didn't, she abandons it. And it is really quick. As soon as they realize nothing happens, they do stop stimming. Now that the sensory system is regulated, now you can talk about all of your speech goals. You're expanding the mean length of utterance, making sure that you have more functions than just choice making. You might start with choice making because you need a hook, but you want to move quickly into other functions of language, social language, not just requesting, but commenting how they're feeling, answering questions, asking questions, all those things. And let's see, providing opportunity for social language expansion, features that increase the receptive language. So you can build vocabulary through puzzles, for example, where they're picking, you're seeing, do they know all the body parts, and they're getting the body parts to create a puzzle, or do they know all these other pieces of receptive language. Support their motor planning and develop literacy skills. And literacy skills, again, you're going to have to handle 26 letters on a screen if you're going to type anything. So we need to get up to that visual stimuli of being able to handle that many buttons on the screen before they can independently generate language through the keyboard. So you have to remember that we're never stopping at choice making. We're never stopping at yay. If we have 4 buttons on there, they're accurate. The end. That means now you are ready to begin. Let's see. You know, I'm always just kind of saying this, you're going to presume receptive competency and presume expressive potential. I've yet to meet a child who doesn't have receptive language and who doesn't want to communicate. So if you have one, it's the first one on the planet. And you might want to consider that potentially we haven't unlocked this kid. And that's, don't be afraid to fail. We have to keep trying. We have to keep trying. In this particular area of sensory processing, you have to usually try one thing at a time. You try the joint compressions. You don't try the joint compressions and the key guard and turning red and then it's successful and you don't know which part of the dog and pony show you have to do every time. So again, it's methodical and it takes some time, but knowing that it's really main 4 things. Do they are they getting the deep pressure and sensory information that they need? Are they allowed to move in their space? Do you have it set up so that it's visually the correct thing, not only just maybe turning red or the number of feedback buttons on there? And is your release time delay set appropriately? Go down those 4 things each time with those with sensory processing issues, and you're going to solve 90% of the issues. And we have a great success rate for those on the autism spectrum and those with sensory processing disorders. Again, 59% of those who got devices and activated them independently at the evaluation were successful, even though they had significant sensory issues, because we were able to make these accommodations on the fly and find the right combo of those 4 things that help them be successful.